Are we doing Spider-Man?
I think so.
Yeah, okay, let's do it.
I'm never sure how to start these. Like,
You just did it right now. It's happening now.
I am Vincent,
And I am Phelan.
and welcome back to All Doubts. Today we'll be talking about the new Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Far From Home.
I had someone accidentally that I talked to earlier today accidentally refer to it as Spider-Man 3, and I laughed really hard because that's not the Spider-Man that you're thinking of.
Looks like they're on track to have a good Spider-Man 3, or like to have a Spider-Man, like, because, you know, there was the
Curse of Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
That, as a movie title, is cursed.
Yeah, because like I really enjoyed both Tobey Maguire movies, and the second Andrew Garfield movie like sort of tanked that one.
Yeah.
And but this one looks like it's going strong.
Spider-Man Home... Interjection, by the way. What are we thinking? Spider-Man Home Run? Spider-Man Home Sweet Home? Spider-Man Home Baked Cookies?
There have been a lot of like speculation, like Spider-Man Home Alone, Spider-Man Homeward Bound. I don't...
Maybe.
Because they already spent Homecoming.
Yeah. So maybe it's like, Spider-Man Homecoming 2, Spider-Man Home... I don't know. I think the idea of Home Run is funny because it would be a third, it'd be a third and final.
It's like, because with... people were joking with he's on the run, they're out to get him. He doesn't have his tech. He'll have to scrounge up some stuff. Home Alone,
That'd be pretty good.
But before we dive in, how have you been? What have you been up to?
I have been watching movies as a way to stay sane while working a lot.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I do in my free time. I have brief human interaction, unfortunately, but I try and make it count. Oh, my life's actually not that somber, but I am very tired, so I fill in time watching movies. I'm in the middle of the third season of Stranger Things. I have not finished it yet. I will report back when that is done. Enjoying it so far, quite a bit. I also, what did I watch recently? I recently watched kind of like a random one in the scope of things we're talking about. I've been to the theater, but it's mainly been like re-seeing Spider-Man or re-seeing Toy Story, which were two things that happened recently. But in regards to home viewing, I recently watched, did you ever see Trainspotting? Like the original film Trainspotting?
No, it's on my list.
Like iconic, obviously, like film for a lot of different reasons. I watched the sequel recently, which came out in like 2017. So the whole thing was that it came out 20 years after the original did, and kind of like sees where all the characters stand after kind of like a twist-ish ending of the first one. Obviously,
it was like a real-time sequel kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a real-time sequel. No spoilers for Trainspotting, which you should probably have seen by now. Not you personally, but the general audience. It came in like 97. I won't spoil it, even though there's time for your homework, but. Exactly as you just put it, exactly like a real-time sequel. So it's really interesting based on the events of how the first one ends. The characters are all kind of in an interesting place when the second one starts 20 years later, and they kind of address that gap and what's gone on in the character's kind of home since he's been away in between the two movies. So yeah, it was like amazing. Like, Ewan McGregor is actually one of my favorites, and absolutely great actor who I feel like as high profile as he is still underrated, like as an actor. Like, you know what I mean? Aside from, God bless Obi-Wan Kenobi, one of like my favorite, on-screen protagonists. Aside from like his role in Star Wars, kind of catapulting him even more than he already was as like a really good character actor. I just feel like he's kind of like an underrated actor. Like I feel like people don't associate him with A-list, kind of roles. But he was great. He was really, really good in that. And, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people were saying they didn't like it as much as the first one, obviously, because the original is like a staple, right? It's like it's a European movie. It's like a European movie staple. Some people are really particular about their dark comedies and, their feelings about, the older movies. But this one, like, it was directed by Danny Boyle. Okay. So the same guy, did 28 Days Later, which is a great zombie film, all the way, to show the variety of his career. He also did Yesterday. Recently, he directed Yesterday as well as directed Slumdog Millionaire. He's a really talented, like versatile director. And they were all talking about how, in this interview I was watching, about how he very much went for a different tone with the second one and like was trying to create an entirely different movie. And I think that's what some people didn't like, but for me it really hit me on a note of I only watched the original Trainspotting a couple years ago, and so it didn't have that long, build up cult movie status for me that it does for some people. So really worth a watch, the two of them, very different tones.
It's sort of tough to like do a sequel that has a different tone.
Yeah.
Right. Like Gremlins 2, far superior than Gremlins 1.
That is a good movie.
Like much better than Gremlins 1. But I remember I watched Happy Death Day just before Happy Death Day 2.
Right.
Or 2U came out because, people love wacky sequel names.
Of course.
But the sequel was, the first one was like a slasher movie with a Groundhog Day. If Groundhog Day was a slasher movie, basically, right? So it was like, spooky, you gotta like, oh no, are they gonna get me? Oh, there's someone with a knife chasing me, kind of thing, right? But in the sequel, it went like hard sci-fi. Not like hard sci-fi, but like it made a hard turn towards sci-fi. And not as much of the like horror slasher as I was expecting. So I was like, oh, this is a different genre of movie.
Different tone.
Yeah.
I think one of the most iconic examples of that is the classic, like the Evil Dead series. By Sam Raimi, directed by Sam Raimi, who also directed Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man's. Whoa, it all ties together. Because the first one is genuinely one of the original. I mean, the reboot came out a couple of years ago. Apparently, was really scary. So I haven't watched it myself. The original one from like the 70s or the 80s, I can't even remember, is a terrifying, like a violent, viscerally violent, terrifying horror movie. And then the second one is kind of a little bit campy at parts and does this weird thing where it kind of reboots the story of the first one and tells it again, but it's even slightly campier. And then, of course, you get to Army of Darkness, the third one, which is iconic for how cheesy and deliberately schlocky it is, which of course has become Sam Raimi's kind of signature style of he makes some really scary horror movies and then he also makes some deliberately schlocky horror movies where they're kind of like so overacted and over the top that they're almost B-movie-esque, but they're meant to be. Right? That's what the performances that he tries to capture from his actors, which is always kind of fascinating, and that's what he goes for. But obviously Army of Darkness is like, a guy gets a chainsaw hand and he's fighting demons and there's quippy one-liners, whatever. But some people forget that it started with the original Evil Dead, which is a genuinely terrifying horror movie.
Yeah. I hadn't seen any of those, but I have seen the reboot episode where they reference Evil Dead. Remember Reboot?
Yeah, I remember. Oh god, everyone remembers Reboot.
Where they like explain why it looks like the way it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a TV series of Evil Dead a couple years ago. Yeah. I have it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Also on my list.
Yeah. What about you? What have you watched?
I've watched a couple movies. I watched the new Toy Story. It's pretty good. It didn't make me cry though.
No, the bits at the end hit me pretty hard.
Yeah, like that those got me the closest, but like I don't know, maybe it didn't hit the same buttons, or like this, like the buttons it hit didn't hit me as strongly as the buttons in the previous one.
Yeah, I know.
Where
it was a lot of people.
It was very like Dante's Inferno-esque,
right?
Of the flaming pit,
yes,
and such. So I watched that. I watched Stuber, pretty good.
Yeah.
It was weird because like there are a lot of the jokes were like little was Kumail Nanjiani. It's the one with Kumail Nanjiani and
Dave Bautista.
Yeah, Dave Bautista, and Kumail is Uber driver, and Dave is Dave. Dave is a
Bautista, Bon Bautista. Yeah, is
a cop who you find out he just got LASIK, so he can't see. Okay. Really, that's why he can't. That's why he needs this other guy around.
Okay.
But a lot of the jokes that...
Spoilers for Stuber.
Spoilers for the first 5 minutes.
Okay.
Spoilers for the premise of Stuber. But a lot of the jokes that Kumail has are like little like things he like mutters to himself.
Right.
Which like if you're not paying attention, you might not catch.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it.
I actually enjoy movies like that. I like where you actually have to pay attention to get the joke, some of the humor in the background.
But but like one of the downsides of that is it doesn't have the as much of the audience all laughing together.
Right.
if a critical mass of people don't hear the joke or don't get the joke.
Right.
So I watched that. I watched The New Lion King. Not bad.
Didn't rock your socks off, but isn't worth the vitriol it's getting.
It was solid. It was a solid movie. If you want it to be different than the cartoon, you'll be disappointed. They updated some of the jokes.
Right.
And, well, the one thing I was disappointed at was that they shortened significantly the bad guy song that Scar had.
Be prepared?
Yeah.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah. He talks for most of it. He only sings for a very small piece of it, which was... Because, in the original, he talks poetically at the beginning before launching into the song part, but this one, it's mostly the poetic speaking.
I'm ready right now. I thought you were going to start singing. It's I'm ready to go right now.
But no, that was a solid song. I have it on my iPod every once in a while show up, it's a solid song. I can understand them not doing the same choreography as the cartoon.
Oh,
with
you
a
mean
bunch
the Nazi bit?
Yeah. The Nazi bit of this beloved children's cartoon about lions.
Yes. Woohoo.
But I was so disappointed that they cut short the lyrics and stuff. But the thing I most enjoyed was the other week I saw my buddy is in a local stage production of Newsies for the Theater Under the Stars production of Newsies at Stanley Park in Vancouver. If you're local and you're hearing this before, I think it runs till, let's say, August 15th. Every other night, it alternates between their showing of Mamma Mia.
Ooh.
Yeah. But I saw their Newsies. I hadn't seen Newsies all the way through before, let alone a stage production. And it was very, very good. It was very fun. The songs are still stuck in my head. Some of the song lyrics, though, I will say, are sort of dumb. For example, there's a part in the movie where the premise. It's about the newspaper kids from, I believe, 1899. And they're going on strike in New York. Right. And there's a part where the Newsies from Brooklyn show up to help the main guys, and they show up and they're singing, and they mention that they're Newsies and that they're from Brooklyn a couple times, and then they have a line where they say, "We're from Brooklyn, we are Newsies, we are Brooklyn Newsies," and I'm like, oh yeah, where are you from again? What do you do? But other than that, it's like.
You got a problem with Brooklyn kids or what?
Well, maybe they were trying to characterize those particular characters, but just they just keep saying they're from Brooklyn and that they're Newsies, and I'm like, oh, maybe if you tell me 7 more times.
Sounds like an American high school pep rally.
But no, that included. It was a fun show. It was an outdoor thing. So in the second act, I got 10 mosquito bites. So I recommend bug spray
Bugging up
for that.
Theater in the Stars is a special place in my heart because it's where my first and I think thus far maybe only experience there, if I'm recalling, was Shrek the Musical.
Oh yeah,
had a grand old time.
These outdoor theater things I think are interesting. A couple years ago, I went to Bard on the Beach,
myself
right?
as well, yeah.
And I might have mentioned this on a previous episode of the podcast, but it was an episode. It was an episode. It was a performance of Romeo and Juliet. Right. And they did a weird. So sometimes they do it in period. Sometimes they do it modern. This one was a weird mashup of they would have swords, but also an iPad,
right,
kind of thing.
Okay.
And with Bard on the Beach, with a stage, there's like an opening window at the back. Where it's open out to the sea, basically. Right. And I don't know how they did this, but every time there was a scene at a party or a fancy gala or whatever in Romeo and Juliet, there was just always a yacht or a speedboat in the background. And oh man, they pulled out all the stops.
They made it work for us.
But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Also, I also watched Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man.
The new Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So I've decided to make this a thing.
Okay.
And I don't like that insufferable thing where people on podcasts try to make memes. But in case you're interested and want to adopt the 2019 way of speaking with me, I've decided to take the internet meme and phrase of "that's not very cash money of you," and I've now changed it after watching Spider-Man: Far From Home to "that's not very Jake Gyllenhaal of you," because that man is just pure charisma the entire film through. Spoilers for Spider-Man: Far From Home, by the way, in case that wasn't obvious. Sorry, I stole your line there. Is that okay?
What?
You're usually the
No, I'm
usually
not.
spoiler guy.
You're
This is
usually
staying
the
in, by
guy
the
who
way.
says I'm the guy.
You're the guy who always. This is staying in, by the way. I'm going to make sure.
Yeah, no. You're the guy who says I'm the guy.
Hey, it's Vincent here. Spoiler for Spider-Man: Far From Home. I'm gonna work on my impression of you. Anyways, that's not very. You know what? That wasn't very Jake Gyllenhaal of you, Vincent. He's just like that guy is so charismatic the entire way through. Even though you don't trust him. We're past the spoiler warning. You should know better by now. Like you want to trust him. You want to like him. You want to believe everything that's going on. You want to believe it, even though you probably don't. So yeah, that's my new thing is that's not very Jake Gyllenhaal of you when people aren't being very cool, because I think Jake Gyllenhaal is like the new cool for me. This is a great moment to actually interject as well, because interject on myself, interject into the bigger conversation. Spoilers for Phelan's interjections. I have this whole phenomenon that I refer to. I think I've told you about this before, that I call Gyllenhaal List. Because to me, if I put an actor on my Gyllenhaal list, it basically means that they are capable of and generally try to do as many roles as possible in their career.
Okay.
Like basically a person who can do absolutely anything or regularly, takes on a diverse amount of roles. I had this phenomenon I refer to as the Gyllenhaal list, because I feel like both Jake Gyllenhaal and his sister, obviously also an actress, Maggie Gyllenhaal, are just these two actors that will literally do anything they want. Like they'll do everything, even now being comparatively big names. They'll do anything from a superhero blockbuster movie to an indie film that 200 people see in total, to a weird offbeat comedy, dark comedy, to an animated animated voice work. They will literally do absolutely anything in the spectrum of their career, and I just find it really fascinating. There's I have my list of actors that I group into this category, because I feel like those two in particular have kind of set the precedent for just doing they basically just do whatever they feel like doing, and they don't necessarily cater to trends. And I find that really cool, because I think that there's been all this conversation before about Jake Gyllenhaal, for example, being in a superhero movie, and he didn't disappoint. He was one of my biggest points, because a lot of people will say a story is only as good as the villain, and I think he did a really good job of being an interesting and unique take on a villain in this one. That was the first thing I had to say, because that was his performance was one that really stuck out to me in the movie. Yes. Would you like to interject now?
Going to your Gyllenhaal list idea, I feel like that might that's something allowed by his level of success. You know what I mean? If it's to paraphrase, it's actors who can both do something a big blockbuster and also a weird indie thing.
Yeah, but with whatever frequency and at whatever point, they could do 2 blockbuster movies back to back and then do a string of 3 or 4 indie movies. It's very diverse, and it reads, if you were looking at their what am I looking for? A resume, right?
Right.
If you're reading it like a resume, it's they basically do whatever they want to do. It's how it seems. Because there are some actors that I personally feel do kind of just stick to the blockbuster trend and only do, kind of, not necessarily blockbusters superhero movies, but movies that are guaranteed to be popular or expected to be. And they kind of just fall into the category of doing, I'm going to say with all love intended, that's kind of where I feel like Will Smith is at right now. He's doing Disney movies, he's doing blockbuster action movies, he's doing YouTube rewinds. But you know what I mean? He strikes me as someone who, not that I loved him in Suicide Squad. I still have, that's my hill to die on. There were several parts of that movie I actually enjoyed, even though a lot of people didn't. And I really liked Will Smith in it. But I feel like he's an example of someone who's going for blockbustery, same, comparatively safe stuff, right? Whereas, maybe some people say this is a safe movie for Jake Gyllenhaal. This has been followed by, this has been in the, in the middle of a career that started with Donnie Darko, which a lot of people, even including Jake Gyllenhaal himself, don't know why it still has a cult following and is as popular as it is, right? It's not necessarily what it was intended to be, but it started out that way and you've just kind of gone with that since.
Sure. But I'm thinking that might be something that is allowed because of his success.
Right.
He is able to do what he wants, because if he wants to do something, people will say yes.
Right.
Whereas if it's someone who's, let's say if someone has the same resume but in terms of movies
Right.
or whatever. But they're not voted sexiest man alive however many times Jake Gyllenhaal has been. You know, like, oh, so-and-so got in a Marvel movie, good for them, kind of thing. And not oh, cool, they took time away from doing indie things to do a Marvel, you know what I mean?
I also feel like, though, he could have done a Marvel movie and almost did a couple times at any point earlier in his career. As well as the fact that, for example, like, there are people, though, who I would argue, you know, counter-wise, could branch out but choose not to.
Sure. So actually, speaking of that, he was actually I remember reading he was going to be the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
Yes, that's a story.
And then didn't. There was, I think, I think on his Instagram or something leading up to Far From Home or whatever. It was him reading the script and looking at the cameras like, hey guys, I don't think I'm Spider-Man in this one.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that was I actually quite like that. Because that's one of those things that people kind of put in there is like movie trivia, you know, to try and impress people. Like, hey, did you know Jake Gyllenhaal was almost Spider-Man? And it's like, yeah, we do.
But yeah, so let's talk about Far From Home.
Yes.
I liked the opening. The opening was solid. Well, not the Fury opening, the In Memoriam opening.
Oh man, that was good. Yeah, this is okay. So I feel like that's a start right there. Is one of my biggest takeaways of why I really liked this movie. Sometimes I feel like when they market a movie, Marvel in particular, it's not always honest, and sometimes they just say what they want people to hear. Like you're gonna love this film. We're gonna get you excited about this film, right? An example of what I really liked was before Infinity War, they went on about how this is Thanos' movie and all the other characters are a part of it, but it's Thanos' movie. And I felt like Infinity War lived up to that. What I loved about Far From Home was that they build it as this is the last film in Marvel's Phase 3 of movies. It's meant to be an epilogue to Endgame. And I really felt like they lived up to that. I felt like it was a perfect, like, it was an epilogue. It was the cap point after Endgame to kind of tie everything off. Everything to do with the events of Endgame was like there was a lot of reference to it. And I feel like they did that deliberately as kind of like, okay, you've had this big spectacle of Endgame. Instead of just jumping right on to the next thing, we're going to give you a comparatively smaller movie that references the events of the bigger movie and see some actual interplay between characters to kind of round off this chunk of like Marvel, like in the history book. And I feel like that did it really well, particularly as you're saying how they start with the, you know, the in memoriam of all the heroes who died and
and like the low quality like JPEG of Vision.
Yeah.
Vision's candle. And then even after the slideshow montage thing, when they were talking about the blip, as they call it. I loved all the dumb names they had in this one.
Yeah.
The blip,
the
Peter Tingle. I think there was a couple other ones as well. But and when the reporter girl Betty Brant, who got a significantly more screen time in film than I was not expecting that at all. But when they were like, oh, when the heroes stopped Thanos that time or whatever, and there's like the insert picture of all the heroes, and they have the stupid glowing outline on the clip art outline on each of the in sort of a supposed to be a serious
kind of way
kind of thing.
And they're like, and thank you to those 2 9th grade students for producing this in memoriam video. And it's like these 2 little skinny kids. And I don't know if we want to do it like order of events or if you just want to hop around. Go for it, I'll follow.
But I did like how they sort of addressed how bad at keeping his identity secret Peter Parker is. Yeah. Tom Holland's Peter Parker is.
Mirroring Tom Holland's real life inability to keep Marvel spoilers to himself.
Yeah, although I wonder how much of that is genuine now, because there have been some recently that are very clearly on purpose. I think there was one where he was at a convention or something, and he was like, I'm about to, I forget what he was about to go do something, and he was like, oh, I'm just reading the script for Spider-Man 2, I don't know anything about it, I can't say anything about it, but I'm reading the script, and he shows the iPad and says Spider-Man Far From Home. Yeah. That's how people, that was the reveal of the title.
That was, as a joke.
So, because I feel like with something as big and monolithic as the MCU is now, Marvel Studios, Disney in particular, if they wanted Tom Holland to stop doing that, they would get him to stop doing that by now. I could see maybe like the first one, maybe two, were like accidental slip-ups, but I feel like they've either given him the green light or like fed him like, okay, let's play into this.
Right.
Yeah, I think because he's had a couple of like accidental quote unquote reveals. Right. As a story arc, so I guess.
Right.
In the what am I trying to say? On the press junket, as a like, oh yeah, that's his thing,
So it could be art imitating life or vice versa, but yeah. But no, definitely, Peter Parker is not the best at keeping his eyes. I remember there's one scene near the beginning of the movie where he goes backstage and he's talking to Jon Favreau's character, like Happy Hogan, and then as he steps back into the room he was in previously.
Yeah, he walks backwards.
And he has his mask off, and everyone in the theater was like, oh, because they thought he was walking out there without his mask on. And of course, he turns and there's no one there, and he jumps away. Everyone let out a breath, which is really funny. And which I think they did that a couple times too, and I thought it was funny given how that mid-credit scene at the end of the movie.
Yeah. With a cameo that no one was expecting.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that. You want to talk about jumping around? Honestly, the fact that they said after the movie came out in an interview that they wouldn't have brought back the character of J. Jonah Jameson if J.K. Simmons wasn't in for it absolutely warmed my heart. Because I think everyone can agree, whether you love or hate the Tobey Maguire movies, J.K. Simmons is consistent in all three of those, even the often justifiably belittled third one. Like, he's great in all three of those films. He very much, like, it was a smaller role, but to me it's very much Ryan Reynolds was born to play Deadpool, Hugh Jackman was born to play Wolverine, RDJ was born to play Iron Man. Like, J.K. Simmons was meant to play J. Jonah Jameson, whether anyone realized it or not at the time in like 2001 when the first one came out. So I that was amazing. I was not expecting that either. That was so incredibly cool. Because of course you hear rumors about it, but a lot of them is like, fan service, like fans hoping it happens. Yeah, fan expectation and speculation. So that was amazing. That made me very happy. And I also like the people pointing out the fact that it was not kind of as a sign of certain things in the Marvel movies changing with the times from what they used to be in the comics. Instead of the Daily Bugle being this reputable newspaper and news source, it's like an online InfoWars style ranting at a screen.
Yeah, because they frame it as like this like controversial
news site, the Daily Bugle. I thought that was brilliant.
Although, so I like that he's back. I don't know what they've done with his character. Although it'll be fun to see.
How do you mean?
I mean, I wish it was the same. He had the same personality from the Tobey Maguire, where he's like, he's not a bad person.
Yeah.
In short, but in the Netflix shows, they do have the Daily Bugle. I think. And they did have the Daily Bugle as a regular news site as part of the marketing ARG-ish thing for Homecoming, I believe.
Okay.
So maybe I don't know if that's canon anymore.
Right.
Or maybe that was one of the changes by the Snap. They can do whatever they want with the Snap. Or maybe Jameson's website thing is a branch, like the meme part of BuzzFeed,
right?
Kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas from what I understand, the rest of BuzzFeed is pretty legit.
Yeah.
In terms of journalism and such. But yeah, because so I don't know what I'm trying to get at with this, but the
J. Jonah Jameson, JJJ.
But I'm so happy that he's back in the universe, both the character and the actor.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what they do with him.
They said that they want to factor him into the next one as well.
Because that also has a lot of people speculating about what the next bad guy is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's some speculation that there's always the speculation of it being the Goblin or whatever, which has already been done. People want it to be Doc Ock after the very successful PlayStation game,
right?
That did Doc Ock very, very well.
Yeah.
Also, Doc Ock in Into the Spider-Verse was
the female version was pretty cool. Yeah,
it would be plastic or
recyclable
Yeah, like not the shiny metal arm, but the
tubes
tubes,
kind of for her octopus arms.
Yeah.
I definitely, Into the Spider-Verse is still one of my favorite Spider-Man, if not like my favorite Spider-Man film of all time. They just did so much right with that. I think pulling from that in the live action wouldn't be the worst idea.
Yeah. So, but the ones that I think are most interesting are Kraven, which we haven't seen in a movie yet.
Right.
And I only know about him from the 90s cartoon.
For those who are not aware, Kraven is a Russian man who is a hunter who skins people, and he becomes obsessed with Spider-Man and views him as the ultimate prey.
Does he skin people? I think, he skins animals, certainly.
Skins people. Animals is what I meant to say, yeah. Well, that would be a very different movie.
If
it would cross over with Silence of the Lambs.
But, yeah, and people are speculating that, now that he knows who Spider-Man is, he can find him and hunt him.
I've also seen interesting people proposing, instead of having the typical Sergei Kravenov, who is a Russian hunter, they're talking about the idea of maybe what if Kraven was a hunter who came from Wakanda, and how that would factor into the larger MCU overall, which I think would be interesting. Having an actor of color get the chance to play this really ominous and seminal Spider-Man villain.
Sure. I'm not sure if they would want to have someone evil in Wakanda, though. Or, I don't know, they could have him be misguided. Or like with Vulture,
Right.
They could give him a reason. Maybe Tony Stark did something to this other guy, too. And
yeah. Yeah, Tony's racking up a bit of a count for pissing people off. I think that's another thing. The only, I'm kind of neck and neck. I can't decide which of these two first MCU Spider-Mans I'd like better. And I could definitely tell you Far From Home would have taken the cake if it had Michael Keaton in it. But I definitely, as the Vulture, but I feel like how they ended the first one is very much setting him up for coming back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because he was impeccable. That's something that both of these Spider-Man movies have done well, is, again, the whole concept of movie only as good as its villain, is they've cast the villains very well.
The acting was good, but also the characterization,
yes.
The creation of he's the villain with the second best reason for why he's a villain.
Yeah.
Second only to Killmonger.
Yeah.
In terms of, I can see that.
Yeah.
Still not the best way, but I can see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Let me just tie off this thing of so some people are thinking Kraven, or also Scorpion, who we've seen
been set up
pre-Scorpion suit in Homecoming. But also in the comic books, he was created by J. Jonah Jameson, who wanted to take out Spider-Man, and then he goes crazy with the suit or whatever.
With his big scorpion tail.
Yeah.
I would also be interesting to see from a character design standpoint how the MCU does that. Because, Vulture was kind of cool because he was ominous and kind of modern. He was aviator suit mixed in with alien technology, and then Mysterio, went for a very cliche kind of supervillain kind of look.
A very, very cliche story, which they call it in the movie, but also the costume design was very explicitly a combination of Iron Man and Thor,
right,
in terms of his suit, and also Doctor Strange with his mystical shapes that he conjured with his hands.
Yes. So I feel I'd be interested to see as well, because I rewatched Homecoming recently. After I watched Far From Home, and no, they definitely seem like they're setting up the Scorpion, who is another perennial Spider-Man villain. It's interesting to see where they're going with that too, because part of we were talking about the Curse of Spider-Man 3. What they were also originally thinking about doing is before the third Spider-Man, the Andrew Garfield one came out, the third Amazing Spider-Man, I guess it would have been. They were thinking about doing a movie set in that universe, in Andrew Garfield's universe, Spider-Man universe.
The Sinister Six.
They wanted to bring in the Sinister Six, which is, to those who are not aware, is basically, it would have been the precursor to Suicide Squad, doing a supervillain movie. Right. Sinister Six would be all of Spider-Man's six greatest enemies coming together to form the supervillain team. And so everyone's kind of wondering if that's what they're starting to build to as well in the MCU.
Yeah, there have been speculation about the Sinister Six, although, with the Andrew Garfield point, that just seems like doubling down on the thing that sunk the second movie and also the third Tobey Maguire movie, of them having too many bad guys.
Yes.
Right? With the third Tobey Maguire movie, they had Sandman and Venom, who teamed up without having... And I guess the Goblin, who teamed up without having ever met each other.
Yeah.
They just meet in an alley and hey, I can help you, guy I've never met before.
Yes.
And then in Amazing Spider-Man 2, it was... What was it? It was also Goblin, right? Goblin and...
Electro and the Rhino.
The Rhino was sort of a first scene and last scene kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one also had too many...
I think though if they decided to frame it
with the MCU though, they have a pretty good track record of having more than one villain. Like in Homecoming, they had Vulture as the primary, and then Shocker as like a henchman secondary villain.
And also, people have pointed out with Shocker being not necessarily one of the biggest, but a recurring Spider-Man villain, and him factoring into this whatever the MCU roster is for the Sinister Six.
He's also not one of the most like top tier heavy hitters. Even in the Spider-Man game, the PS4 Spider-Man game, he's the minor spoilers, I guess, of the bad guys you fight. He's the one who knows the least about what's going on,
right?
Because he just keeps trying to rob a bank or whatever. And when Spider-Man's like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, "I don't know. I'm just trying to rob this bank."
See, while I have not played through the entirety of the game myself, I also feel like, though, as a counterpoint, the Spider-Man game is an example for how a big group of villains can work. Yeah. And what I also think is different when you were saying about like how the MCU has a good track record, what the MCU also has different from those other examples you mentioned is they've already taken the time to start to build up characterization and interplay between their characters, even though there's only like a couple scenes with Scorpion or the man who will become Scorpion in Homecoming. They establish the fact that he is like a serial killer and that even other criminals don't like working with him. Yeah. Right? So it's this idea of there's a bit of characterization there, and then seeing how that could build off of characters like, Michael Keaton's Vulture. There's a lot of theories of, with Jake Gyllenhaal, who is obviously dead. We already gave a spoiler warning by the end of this one, supposedly. Ways that he could return, whether it's artificial intelligence or whether it's another version of Mysterio. There's ways that they can bring all these characters that they've started setting up together and let them play off one another in a way that no other movie has done, that no other superhero movie with multiple villains has done before.
Yeah, because like the issue with having more than one villain is that it's hard to, especially in a movie, because like the video game was able to do it because it has more than 2.5 hours of time to explain who they are, what they want, and how they're going to do it, and how you're going to stop them. Right. But in a movie where you do have the time constraint, if it's just a single movie with the MCU, the time can bleed over into the other ones, like with Claw or Clue.
Who?
The bad guy in
Black Panther. Claw.
Okay.
Andy Serkis with an impeccable performance that was cut short.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, a surprising death.
Yes.
They could bring him back though. They could we sprayed some vibranium on him. He's alive. we tortured
metal juice. We gave him metal juice.
We accidentally brought him back with a snap. Who knows? They could.
There you go.
Sidebar. I remember in Heroes when they had an episode where do you remember Heroes?
I loved Heroes.
When they explained that they could bring someone back to life with the cheerleader's blood, who she's the healer, she can regenerate herself.
Yes.
And then I don't understand why anyone died anymore in that show.
Yeah, I know. That was definitely I've said before on the show here that I hate plot hole as an overused term. That was a plot hole.
Yeah, because I think an episode or two later, the infinitely old bad guy was killed by the new bad guy by being turned to dust or whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, if they really wanted to, they could just get a blood bag and start squirting that around the room. Atoms and he regrows,
Vacuum them up and mix them with the blood.
Or not even that, just keeps squirting the blood around the room until it hits him.
Yeah.
And it's I'm alive again because no one dies anymore.
Yeah.
They could bring him back if they wanted to. If you're trying to set up a bad guy in a single movie, which is what they tried to do with Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2, here's the guy we've just met. We tried to establish that he's been around before, and now suddenly he's the bad guy, which you don't care about. And then there's no momentum there. It's rushed,
right?
Whereas in the MCU, because it's all connected, it's all bleeding into each other. They could have one person show up in one thing and then become someone else in the other one. This is not the strongest example, but the teacher who's always the tour guide or the chaperone for the field trips showed up first in The Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton,
right? As
the guy who Ed Norton gives a pizza to,
right?
And the people who make the movie are like, oh yeah, sure, let's say he's the same guy,
yeah.
As sort of a sure, why not kind of thing. They've also done a similar thing with the kid in the Iron Man mask in the third Iron Man,
the second Iron Man,
that Iron Man saves.
Yeah, retroactively.
Of people, when all the fans were like, hey, that would be cool if that was Peter Parker. And they were like, yeah, sure, why not?
Sure, it's Peter Parker. Yeah, and the little kid in the spider. Yeah. See, what's interesting too, you're talking about building in that way. that was one thing I liked about the Tobey Maguire ones, with like James Franco's character, and that they had him actually go through somewhat of a character arc insofar as you could with those movies. And I feel like the more time you have to play with,
you say arc, but there was that big chunk where he had amnesia.
That is true too.
But
then he gets his memory back in a very schlocky Sam Raimi movie-esque twist. Air quotes. But I think something that I was talking about, I have this like this friend that I joke around with where I'm like, I think Marvel's listening to me because I'll say something and then they'll say the same thing. I'm like, I think Marvel's like eavesdropping on me with spy technology. But after coming out of Far From Home, I was saying how Tom Holland only has a couple movies left on his contract, and obviously it would make everyone really sad if he decided to stop being Spider-Man like in the immediate future. And then I'm hoping they will work up something new, whatever. And Kevin
Feige,
did
foreshadow Miles Morales.
They didn't foreshadow Miles Morales.
They could easily just toss the torch to him.
The thing with that is that they've said now, like Kevin Feige, Mr. Godfather, MCU big director man, has said that they're looking at doing the thing. Basically, the thing I was saying was like if they did multiple trilogies, right? Have this one be like the Home trilogy, Homecoming, Far From Home, Spider-Man 3, Sweet Home Alabama, whatever it's going to end up being. But he's actually said the same things, that they want to do 3 trilogies of high school Spider-Man, college, getting even more science-y, starting to be like a technical adult Spider-Man, and then a 3rd trilogy of like post-university adult Spider-Man. And there's so many storylines in each of those different points of Spider-Man's life that they could do. And I think that the fact that they said they're thinking about doing that is amazing, because it also lets them sow seeds now for movies that'll come out a few years from now. And so I think that it would be a smart way of playing it, particularly as they've said before that they want Tom Holland to be like the Robert Downey Jr. of this chunk of the Marvel movies, of like kind of like the focus. Like there's so many other characters, but this character is kind of like tying it together.
Two things, two separate things. Remind me of him being the Iron Man of the future.
Yes.
But going back to setting up bad guys earlier, I remember reading that if there was going to be a 4th Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, the bad guy would have been Mysterio.
Mysterio and Vulture,
and that to play Mysterio, they would have gotten Bruce Campbell.
I read that too.
Who, who showed up in the first one as a waiter who saves. He shows up in the second one as a usher who won't let Peter Parker into the stage.
Yes.
Into the
and then he shows up as a maitre d' at a restaurant in the third one. Yeah.
He was in the first one. I think he pulled someone away from rubble in the first one or something.
Yeah, something like that.
But for the first 3 movies, they don't really explain that he's the same guy, because he's in different jobs or whatever, and very, very different jobs. He's a waiter in one, he's an usher in another one, he's, I don't know, a impromptu rubble rescuer, pusher out of the way in the first one. And then in the 4th one, it was when he's like a struggling actor or whatever, and then which would also play into because Bruce Campbell is he's had a lot of campy roles,
schlocky stuff with Sam Raimi,
from The Evil Dead, which would have been neat. And I enjoy a good Bruce Campbell. He was the narrator in the good Spider-Man game, based on the second movie, he was great in Burn Notice. Have you seen Burn Notice?
I have not.
Oh, it's pretty good. It has Bruce Campbell and 2 other people whose names I don't remember. But it's like a police police procedural, but it's like victim of the week, crime of the week kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas Bruce Campbell plays the buddy character, like the the drunk uncle kind of buddy character, and the main character is a relatively serious and buttoned down ex-spy who got burned in the pilot episode, and he's trying to fired in the first episode, and he's trying to figure out who got him fired and why. And the third person is that guy's former girlfriend, who is Irish for one episode, and then they explain, because she has a very bad Irish accent in the first episode.
Okay.
And then the second episode, the guy's like, "Hey, what happened to your accent?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm trying out my British accent."
Yeah.
And she just speaks with a regular British accent for the rest of the show. And it's never mentioned again unless they need to talk about her having been in the IRA as part of her backstory.
Right.
But no, it was a solid show. It was fun with the main character being the serious, business, serious business. I'm a former spy. I'm he does narration, like, you know, of like lessons of like, when you're a spy, blah, 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 you know, talking about like why he's doing a thing he's doing or like how to best do what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was like, you know, if you're going to break into someone's house, don't wear black, because then if you get caught, how are you going to explain it? And like, you know, just pretend that you think you're supposed to be there, and that explains why his character walks out of the kitchen eating some like frozen yogurt or whatever. Like if he gets caught, he's like, "Oh, this is your house? I thought it was my house," kind of thing. And like, you know, he narrates that, and he's sort of like a serious guy. Counterpoint by these two like skirt chasing drunk uncle buddy guy, and also like very violent and intense former IRA girlfriend agent. But no, it was a fun show. Back to Spider-Man though.
Yes.
Second thing I was going to say was
Iron Man
of the future. I remember reading a theory of how that someone had when they saw that what's his kid's name? Harley, the kid from Iron Man 3.
Yes.
When he showed up at the
funeral of Tony Stark.
Right. And how like also connecting that with how pivotal Spider-Man has been to the MCU since his arrival. That if they had not had Spider-Man, or if the paperwork or whatever, the deal with Spider-Man had not gone through, that they would have set up the kid as Tony Stark's sidekick,
right,
or like protege or whatever,
right,
which they sort of set the seeds for in Iron Man 3, because apparently they had that kid sign like a multi-movie contract,
right,
kind of thing. But when they got Spider-Man on board, they switched him out with Spider-Man and went from there. But how their backup or their original plan without Spider-Man was for that kid to be to fill the role that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is sort of filling as the protege of Iron Man, assuming the MCU starting with Civil War proceeded as it did, but without Spider-Man, that they would have had that kid be in that roster slot.
Which does make a lot of sense. There's been a lot of... Something that I really liked about the film, too, is that it really grapples with that question of, again, as serving as an epilogue of this chunk of the Marvel Universe of what's next, and, who's going to be the next Iron Man. And one of my... As much as I loved the film for how fun and carefree and summery, like a movie it was, like blockbuster sounds like a demeaning word sometimes, but like a blockbuster, like a summary, fun movie, whatever, feel good and stuff. As like light and carefree and cool as it was, one of my favorite scenes in the film was like the serious scene in particular, where it's Spider-Man's just been hit by a train. He's at his lowest point in the movie, which of course in the hero's journey there's always that part where they're at the lowest they can go, and he has that conversation with Happy Hogan
on the jet.
Iron Man's former best friend and all this stuff. And also an interesting dynamic between these two characters is because in Homecoming, like the first film, Happy just like does not like Peter.
He
finds him as an annoyance and whatever, So to see him actually treat him with more respect in this one, and to actually see them have somewhat of a relationship, was fascinating. And the scene where he's basically saying, I don't know if I'm Iron Man. Everyone keeps asking me who's going to lead the Avengers, who's like, am I an Avenger? Am I going to be the new Iron Man? Who's the new Iron Man? And I don't think it's me. That scene I thought was really, really good because it was so realistic to, of course everyone's going to be like, Tony Stark was like our messianic figure who saved the world, so who's it going to be now?
He's the big figurehead of the
Avengers, of the superhero movement in this, fictitious world.
Yeah, the most public identity.
Of all, he was the face of it. Yeah, exactly. So I thought it was really interesting to have this really actually serious scene and have, Happy say to him, no one could keep up with Tony, not even Tony. I thought it was really nice that they kind of took a moment, instead of just like doing what everyone thought they were going to do of throwing like a cameo in there from Robert Downey Jr. or having, some type of like AI or like a will or something left behind for Peter. I like that they just stuck to referring to like, how big a shadow he cast over everything and what he left behind.
The closest thing we had to him showing up was that every place they went to, they found some graffiti in honor of.
Or even when they're traveling around in Europe, the kids on their summer vacation, and there's like the picture in all the airports. There's like pictures on video screens and stuff.
Yeah, everywhere. He's everywhere. To show that he's a global figure.
Because even though he was like American former arms dealer and current philanthropist and inventor, he saved the obviously they don't know that he saved the universe, but he saved the world.
I'm sure they got the word out.
They got the word out enough. But
I'm sure if high school kids know enough to make an in memoriam for that, I'm sure the news stations.
Well, that's what I'm saying is all over the world though. Like it wasn't just like American high school students. Sure, of course, are going to be like in upstate New York the biggest American celebrity died in America. But it's one of those this is like a global event where people actually realize.
Even if fighting Thanos or whatever wasn't a global event, Tony Stark himself was a big enough figure. If there is a nuke headed to Seattle, say, and Bill Gates pushed the nuke away.
Yes.
That would hit the news, regardless of whether he has a suit of armor or not.
Did his robot suit have the Microsoft logo on it?
I would assume so.
In my headcanon, it does.
I imagine it has the Windows 95 logo on it. But
and then he shoots lasers.
But if Bill Gates saves a single child,
yes,
in a direct way, right. I'm sure he's saving several children with his charities and such.
Yes.
But if he
you kind of brush that aside.
But if he hands-on directly saves a single child, that's gonna hit a pretty big audience, So if he to scale that up to Tony Stark having saved the universe, I'm sure people know about that.
Yes.
I think that's also confirmed with all the graffiti, like I said, just across the globe, or at least across Europe, as far as we've seen.
And I think something that was so good about that too, that also tied in, was the scene where they do about halfway through the film, where they do the turn and reveal that, much like a lot of us suspected, you've ever read a Spider-Man comic, that Mysterio was the bad guy, and the fact that when he gets the the Deus Ex, the MacGuffin glasses, that enable him to call in a nuclear global airstrike because Tony Stark did nothing.
An army of infant drones that a arms dealer who swore off dealing arms gave to a 16-year-old child. With no oversight. Other than his own morals.
But basically, when he gives them over to Mysterio, to Jake Gyllenhaal,
does it do anything other than the drones? I feel like it needs there's the VR
Iron Man stuff, yeah.
Well, there's the VR hacking into people's phones and such.
Yeah.
And the overlays and whatever. But I want to see it do more things than because the two features we saw it do, three, is talk,
yes,
hack people's phones,
yes,
and call in a bunch of drone strikes. I feel like that's the Iron Man suit that or the Iron Spider suit that he got from Tony Stark could do 20 different types of web.
Yes.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface of what the glasses can do.
I feel like the glasses, are meant kind of similar to when part of the revolution of Iron Man was his AI or whatever, right, that he incorporated in there. So I feel like there's something more there.
Well, it notably did not have AI. It had the voice assistant Alexa, Google whatever, right?
Alexa, call in an airstrike.
But it notably did not have a personality. Which a lot of people are saying if there's also the reason it's believable that he wouldn't put AI in these glasses that can call in an infinite amount of drone strikes,
right,
in the way
having learned his lesson finally from the Ultron thing, in the second Avengers.
But if the glasses did have, a Jarvis level kind of personality, or even Karen that he had in his other suit, they could have easily said no. He meant you. He wants you to have the glasses. Yes, I agree. He could have phrased it better, but no, I am 100% sure Peter Parker, he wants you to have the glasses, and not as.
So that's exactly what it cycles back to. So in that scene where Peter gives the glasses over to Quentin Beck, Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio. What I really like that they did with that too, tying into the whole idea of how impactful and universal Tony Stark was also particularly in Spider-Man's life was that they made Jake Gyllenhaal look as much like Robert Downey Jr. as possible. Like sitting there with the beard and like, the comb back hair, whatever. So when he puts on the glasses, it's, you know what I mean? Really,
it hits you the way it hits Tom Holland.
Exactly. It's like you're looking at, Robert Downey Jr. And you, of course, start thinking about, in an alternate universe, Jake Gyllenhaal could have easily played this character.
Yeah.
Right? But, I thought that was really interesting that they just obviously they showed it in the trailers for the movie of how Tony Stark is everywhere, but they really showed that he felt for someone who didn't have a flashback or who didn't have a cameo or whatever, he was like a character in the movie without being there. And I thought that was really interesting and that it really influenced the events of everyone, because also how that ties into too, is the big reveal, of course, of the film. One of the big twists that everyone's talking about is the post-credit scene of revealing the fact that, Samuel L. Jackson was not actually Samuel L. Jackson the whole movie. He was an alien shapeshifter who was helping out Samuel L. Jackson. So the idea, of course, is that, if Iron Man had been around, the movie wouldn't have happened. Right? Everything would have gone differently because, of course, Nick Fury would have called, Tony Stark before he called anyone else on something like that. So it's interesting how big a presence, the vacuum that Robert Downey Jr., both as an actor and as a character, leaves behind. It's like he was a character in this film in his own right, not being there.
Yeah, although it also raises the question of where are the rest of it raises the question, I think, very explicitly in the In Memoriam news report at the beginning. Yeah. But, where everybody else is.
Has anyone heard from the Avengers recently? It's they're probably dealing with a lot right now.
Yeah, because Cap is old, although they could... I saw someone make a joke about this. They could easily solve that, Cap being an old man. Because earlier in that same movie, they made Ant-Man a baby.
Yes.
So they could, there are several avenues of where they control life and death.
Yes.
Black Widow is dead, apparently. Even, I wonder if there's a refund policy on the Soul Stone.
Yes.
We could ask, Captain America if he wasn't so incredibly old, apparently.
Yes.
Hulk, I guess, should be around.
Yeah.
Unless he's still, nursing his arm.
Yes.
Thor is gone, off adventuring with the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes.
And Hawkeye, I guess, what's he doing now? Because he's relatively fine.
He tried to retire 3 times.
Yeah.
Maybe it took finally. I mean, also, they're not going to tell you where Hawkeye is because that's the Disney Channel series, or a Disney streaming service series waiting to happen.
I guess.
Yeah.
But, I know the futility of asking where the non-main characters in this movie are, but in this movie that's part of this bigger world, this bigger franchise, and it also hinges a lot on it not being anyone else other than Spider-Man, because it's very, very specifically targeted at Spider-Man and Nick Fury. Because prior to the big final fights, speaking of the fights, the hologram fights were exactly what I was looking for in a Mysterio movie.
Yes.
The Batman Arkham Asylum Scarecrow style
scene where you're he's pumped full of psychogenics kind of thing and can't tell
the fear toxin in the Batman, where he's just through a madness corridor, which is exactly what I was looking for in a Mysterio movie. But in the, when Mysterio is talking to Nick Fury, prior to the big, all the elementals have combined and are attacking London, when he finished talking to Nick Fury, he's like, oh good, no one else is here. It's just me. Yeah. Kind of thing. Yeah, and Stephen Strange, he should be around.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments in the movie is when when Peter Parker's talking to Aunt May on the phone, and she's totally doing that thing where your mom is only half listening to you at all times and half interested, but is trying to show support. So she's like, who's that guy you're with? Is it Mr. Strange? She's like, it's Dr. Strange. I loved that scene because that so much reads like a parent who's trying to
remember the name of a
friend. To be relevant, and be like, oh, what's your friend's name again? That's exactly it. And I was very, very accurate, which is actually another thing that I love in this film is the relationships between the characters feel very genuine, which is why I think it's interesting that a bunch of adults are writing stories about teenagers saving the world in the superhuman universe, but it reads still very much like you're watching like a John Hughes movie from the 80s, like a coming of age story. Like the dynamics between the characters, particularly the teen actors or young 20 actors playing teens, seem very authentic, and that's something that I really, really liked.
Yeah, it was all, and like we got to see more of his class.
Yes.
Now, none of them got names other than the ones that already had names. Maybe a couple of them did.
Yeah.
But, we met another one of his teachers.
Yes.
But with the with Mysterio, let's talk about Mysterio specifically.
Yes.
Like there was a lot of speculation about like how they were going to handle Mysterio, or at least the premise of Mysterio as presented in this movie, with a lot of and also jiving that with what we, as people who have heard of Mysterio before, know about Mysterio from before. One of the theories that was going was that, and plus the whole multiverse thing, right? One of the theories that was going was that Mysterio, as a heroic figure, is legitimate and from another multiverse. This is prior to the movie came out, of course.
Right.
Is legitimate. But when he arrived in this universe, he got like killed by this universe's Quentin Beck, who took his shit and became Mysterio. But this guy is like a jerk. He's an evil bad guy, whatever, kind of thing. And that would be why his story checks out by Nick Fury, prior to us realizing that Nick Fury wasn't Nick Fury the entire time. And people were like, for sure that the destroyed, ruined city that we saw in the trailer was from Mysterio's dimension,
right?
Rather than the Mexican city. Mexican?
Yes.
Mexican city that we see for like a minute and a half in the pre-opening.
Right.
Right. And as part of the speculation also was that during the climax of the fight, or the like lowest moment fight, which turned out to be him getting hit by a train, which, to be fair, is a pretty low point in someone's life.
Yeah,
getting hit by a train. Would be Peter Parker getting like shunted into Mysterio's old dimension.
Right.
Which would, according to the theory, justify the title being called Far From Home. If he's in another dimension, that's the furthest from home he's been, because, as Nick Fury said, he's been in space.
Yes.
Whereas him just being in Europe doesn't really reach that far.
Right.
I
mean, I guess it's one of those, just because it's not outer space doesn't mean he's not far from where he actually lives. But I still think that would have been cool. That being said, yeah, because I mean, that's something that I like too, is that it kind of parodied superheroes and comic book explanations of things, like the fact that when they're doing the reveal on how Mysterio faked this whole thing, the toast scene, where Jake Gyllenhaal's toasting all the people who've helped make his ruse possible, and there's the one guy where he's like, the guy who gave me this crazy story that is totally ridiculous and everyone believes right now. It's kind of like a jab at all those people.
That got a bunch of laughs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I always try to catch the same when I'm doing theater checks at work, because like, just to see how people react to seeing the scientist who got yelled at by the Big Lebowski about the box of
Jeff Bridges, in the original Iron Man. I thought that scene was genius, actually. Yeah. That they chose to bring back a character who had 30 seconds of screen time in Iron Man 10 years ago as a secondary.
It's a 12-year gap.
That's right. Yes.
12-year.
Yeah.
He has not shown up since. But him just suddenly being a pretty relatively
like a
pivotal
secondary villain, basically. Yeah,
like that's the second. He's like the second. He's the henchman. He's like the lead henchman. He's the main. He's the only one who got a flashback other than Mysterio.
Right, and who also based on the last time you see him when he's mysteriously downloading things from his computer before Mysterio dies. Everyone's thinking maybe he's the one who leaked the
he's clearly
the fake video that makes it seem like Spider-Man.
Yeah, it'd be weird if the Flash, leaked the footage. But that was another thing. Like they killed Jake Gyllenhaal, but his team is still out there doing shit. Which whether or not Mysterio is, whether or not Jake Gyllenhaal's character is alive or not, they could certainly bring him back. At least a fake version of him.
That's what I was saying as well. Yeah. So between the fact that in the comic books multiple people have been Mysterio, there is they have confirmed that alternate multiverse, alternate universes do exist in the Marvel universe, even though this movie kind of made a parody of them. They have said they intend to explore alternate universes.
Yeah.
Could be, and I think it would be hilarious if, like, Jake Gyllenhaal from another universe showed up in theirs, claiming to be, like, a good guy, and no one believed him.
I feel like, okay, they could do that, but, like, I feel like if they do, because, like, other than it being true, it would be a repeat of what they did in this one, except for it being true this time.
Yeah.
But I think if they do bring him back, assuming they, like, have him be a part of whatever, Sinister Six going forward or whatever, they would need to, there would be initial shock of, like, oh, I thought you died. I saw you get shot by that drone that shot you. They would have to explain that they would have to eventually reveal that it's either entirely a hologram, or like a bunch of drones stacked on top of each other, or a guy with
three drones in a trench coat.
Yeah, or like another guy with like J.J. Gyllenhaal's face just projected onto his own face.
Right. Yeah. Also possible.
Yeah. In the weird MCU universe, that is like 5 years from now, or like 2023 or something.
Yeah.
Although, like, in the toast scene, where all the collaborators are revealed to be former Stark employees, side note, I'm wondering if they're just getting rid of, like, just getting out of their system. Okay, here's the rest of the people angry at Stark.
Right, yeah.
We had the one, here's everybody else, we'll stop doing this.
Yeah.
We know we did this the second time, this is the last one, because it's everybody. But, like, they're former Stark employees, right? Stark is, on top of being a celebrity, he's, the top whatever he does. He's a top robotics guy in the MCU, outside of Wakanda, I imagine. So, like, having been an employee there, I imagine you could get a job at any other, I imagine Hammer Industries or whatever that company is called, if it's still around, and the owner that hasn't been shot in prison or whatever, would gladly take any of these guys
who work for Tony Stark.
Because, like, Jake Gyllenhaal's Quentin Beck's like, oh, he named my project a dumb name, then fired me because I was crazy. And then the Box of Scraps guy is like, oh no, the guy yelled at me once. Because I couldn't do the thing that the founder of the company, or not the founder, but the smartest person in the company was able to do by himself.
Yeah. I also love how...
I do have a bunch of drones, though.
Let's use those. Which is a funny thing in and of itself, as we kind of touched on, giving him this to a 16-year-old. Maybe not the smartest choice.
But also, like, I don't think any of it, like, none of them were really, like, destitute.
No.
They all seem to be doing relatively well.
I also like with that whole thing with Jake Gyllenhaal, where they kind of took the route of the villain who feels like they've been wrong and, present all the flaws of the person who wronged them, quote unquote, but skip over the part where the person who wronged them was kind of right, even if it was a shitty thing to do. Case in point, him being like, yeah, Tony Stark fired me because he said I was unstable. And then you see the rest of the movie, you're like, gee, you think maybe? Like,
you're not really proving him wrong.
Like you're monologuing to your room of henchmen that you are all holding at gunpoint about how you have to kill a 16-year-old boy.
Fair, they did ask repeatedly for a speech.
They did ask for a speech. That's fair.
And, like, which was an interesting way of them giving the exposition of, like, here's how we got here.
Yeah.
Which, of, like, as a, like, acknowledgement of work that was accomplished kind of thing, which is one of the, I guess, more believable
human
ways of doing exposition, you know, like,
which was funny because some people actually felt like that scene was kind of ham-fisted, and I could see how people did. To me, it was meant to be kind of like tongue-in-cheek and satirical of those type of scenes of, let me give you 3 minutes of exposition to explain what my plan is. Some people thought that was kind of like heavy-handed, or that it was kind of lame, or that it didn't really flow, or that it kind of slowed the movie. I thought it was actually pretty funny because I thought it was a good way of, because this, like, they kind of show, despite the fact that Jake Gyllenhaal's playing this, like, kind of a genius in his own right. He's a really hammy character, and it kind of ties into this fact that something that they did that was genius, they changed from the comics, was Mysterio, instead of being like a failed actor slash stuntman special effects guy, he's like a genius who is just really in love with his own voice and really kind of hammy, and so he played that up as if he was an actor. You know what I mean? Like an actor acting as an actor.
And like with the original backstory of Mysterio having been with a stuntman, that explained why he was able to fight, because he could do the choreography or whatever of the fighting. Whereas in this one, they have Mysterio be a angry nerd programmer guy
who's got an iPad on his wrist.
Yeah, who's also good at, conning people and acting and such.
Right.
But like in a when Spider-Man gets his hands on him, that's a pretty short interaction.
Yeah.
This is the same with with the Vulture. I could see why he's not able to legitimately get a paycheck for what he's doing, because he's stealing alien artifacts or whatever, or alien salvage directly from the Starks.
Right.
So he can't be like, oh, here's the thing I invented. Like, oh, how'd you make that? But with the entire Mysterio team, they all made things out of either with their skill or with their creativity. Maybe they don't have the patents to the holograms and the drones and whatever, but they still have the expertise to do those things. Right. And so I don't know I don't know what their end goal was. Their end goal, as described by Quentin Beck, was to be the hero, to trick people into believing that they were a hero, and then getting whatever kind of accolades through that. But that would need to, I imagine, be a pretty short, a quick turnaround.
Right. Of
getting the key to the city and then fleeing. You know what I mean? Whatever. Mm-hmm. Right. But I imagine a lot of the heroic things that would come, or a lot of the benefits of being a hero, the tangible, if you're a greedy person, would come from products, toys or sponsorships or whatever, which would take a long time. It's not oh, you saved my life, here's a big sack of money.
Yeah.
Oh, where are you going? Come back.
I think it was, the idea of, some type of fame or some type of notoriety, which is, something that he ties into, is people only want to listen to you if you're a superhero. And I thought this movie, something that it did really well was kind of tie into the idea of, as overused as the phrase fake news has become these last couple of years. I thought it did a really good job.
That's very much about.
That's very much what it's about. But the thing is that that's what they play up on, and they address it at the end, right? People will believe anything these days, and then he dies. Jake Gyllenhaal says that and then dies. But the idea is that they did that without ham-fisting it. They weren't trying to be this is a movie about, the current presidency and, you know what I mean? The two factions arguing in the media all the time. They just kind of did it in a matter-of-fact way. And then to me, it felt like at the end they were oh, by the way, we're kind of addressing the misleading power and also informative power of media, right? The two sides of the coin. Right. And I didn't feel the whole way they were shoving something down my throat. I felt it was a message that was very relevant for the time that we're living in, but it didn't feel to me like they were overly pushing it or that I was watching a propaganda.
Oh yeah, no,
it was just very factual.
Almost every Marvel movie has a political message.
Yeah.
The comics also had a political message.
Right.
X-Men being the most obvious one.
Yeah.
But to go back to the J. Jonah Jameson scene, while in the moment that's a very oh no, what's going to happen next? Of when his identity is revealed, he's the only one with a secret identity, basically. Mm-hmm. Even I guess Black Panther sort of had a secret identity, but that's sort of just him being subtle,
right?
And not no one needs. I can't have anyone know who I am. But it being revealed. How do you think that's going to be how do you think that's going to? What do you think is going to happen with that? I guess
with revealing who Spider-Man really is.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting because that could tie into the whole people will believe anything these days. Some people might not believe it, but the fact is that there's nothing that they can do about the fact that people are going to be curious.
Right.
Because also some people are going to be like, okay, why, even if it's not true, why would he single out this random high school kid from Queens, right? So that, no matter what...
One specific child.
There's one specific kid with his deer in the head stare, right? They're going to have to deal with that one way or the other. I mean, obviously, I know a lot of people who are comic fans are hoping they don't go the route of the storyline they did in the comics. Did you ever hear about the whole controversy around the I think was it called One Day More?
One More Day.
Spider-Man? One More Day.
One Day More is a song from
Les Mis. I want to see musical Spider-Man. Let's make it happen.
I think there was a musical Spider-Man. I think it didn't go very...
Yeah, it didn't go very poorly. Yeah, U2 did the score. That's a whole nother podcast, right? But... I think a lot of people are hoping that they don't do the One More Day storyline, which, of course, for those unfamiliar, is where basically Spider-Man makes a deal with the the literal devil, the Marvel version of the devil, and basically everybody in the world has their mind wiped of learning who Spider-Man was. But the consequence of that is that his marriage to his wife / at this point girlfriend MJ. Is erased from history, and they were never together, and she has no memory of it. So I think that storyline got a lot of flack, and I mean, to be fair, also viewing it through a certain lens, Spider-Man comic book stories have always garnered a big reaction from people. There was the Superior Spider-Man storyline a few years ago where Spider-Man was body swapped with one of his villains, and there were people get really, really up in arms, particularly about any change to the Spider-Man status quo, sending comic book writers death threats and stuff, which I think is more than a little bit overkill. But I mean, if they found a way to do it in the movies, sure, maybe. But I feel like it's still a little bit too soon to do something of that scope. Right. So I feel like they're going to have to address it somehow because, there's, even if, they deleted the footage of that happening, even if he used his Tony Stark magic to make that not happen, there was a lot of people there in that, kind of in that area that were watching the screen, right?
Plus, it's a news report, so it's people watching the news as well.
Exactly.
Outside of that, it's not a, that stadium doesn't have their own news anchor.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
so
the sorry, do you have more? Or?
But yeah. So I think I'm not really sure how they're going to do it. I feel like there's a lot of options. I don't even know if they know yet. I just felt like they felt it was time to kind of take that leap.
One solution that a lot of people seem to be jumping on board with is that they just have a Skrull be Peter Parker and have Peter Parker be Spider-Man as oh hey, he's a separate person than me.
Yeah.
And they also have the Spider-Man knows a lot of people. They could have, although of the people he knows, it's Tony Stark, who is dead. There's Tony Stark's bodyguard, who no one cares about. There's Nick Fury, who is a spy no one has heard of, really.
Yes.
Other than, I guess, governments and such. But, the average person doesn't really know who he is by design.
Right.
So I think arguably, and also, Captain America is old and unrecognizable. Thor's gone. All the other heroes are apparently out of
the con
or not available at the moment. Although I guess they could call him in, but so the only one who could do a press conference about no, this child is not Spider-Man kind of thing is maybe Pepper Potts.
Yeah,
who I imagine is also busy with other things.
And to say nothing of Gwyneth Paltrow, who I think is also down with the MCU.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so people aren't exactly worried about it being revealed. There's enough team behind him to be able to cover it up or to misdirect it. But people are thinking that the fallout is going to be people not believing the cover up. Which would lead to which also ties into the theory about Kraven. It's oh, they said that this kid's Spider-Man, and I don't believe the spin around them saying it's not Spider-Man. I'm going to continue believing that this kid is Spider-Man. I'm going to hunt this kid.
Right.
Counterpoint, though, he doesn't really modulate his voice when he's Spider-Man.
No.
There's when he is in kill mode or whatever, when he's talking to Troy from Community after gluing his hands to the car.
In the first one, yeah.
But he doesn't really do that. And then when he's doing his charity appearance with Aunt May's people displaced from the Blip charity, that was a neat scene.
Yeah.
Of them also addressing yes, this is the fallout of showing up 5 years
after you've been snapped out of existence.
Yeah. They could have just like reversed everything except for his family. I'm sure they could have done that. You know, if it can if the gauntlet is wide ranging enough to delete half the life, they could like scoop up a single family and bring them into a different timeline.
Yeah.
And not need to, they could like let's bring everybody back and have it be 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I digress. But him like, oh, let's hear Spider-Man say something. Then he's like very awkward. Thanks, miss, for having me come here. Thanks, you guys. Thumbs up. I'm stepping away from the mic now, kind of thing. Which Spider-Man's voice is on record.
He sounds like a kid.
And he sounds like a child.
Yeah.
And so they could. So if people wanted to, there's enough for the crackpots in the MCU to be like, I don't believe this cover up.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Like has there been any other fallout from super villains going after a secret identity? Well, there is, I guess, when the Mandarin was attacking Tony Stark, but the other ones don't really have any. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because characters like Captain America and for example, or all the spy characters kind of live anonymously, anyways.
Yeah. And
then there's characters like Thor, who is just basically untouchable. You know what I mean? Like he's like a hulking, otherworldly giant kind of thing. So characters like Spider-Man, though, that's why I feel like a lot of people have always related to, is because he's very much like a street level, from the neighborhood, like ground level. And he
does deal with the common folk more than
he does, and he has in that way. He's got a lot to lose. He's vulnerable because he's open to the public, right? Because he lives a public life.
Right.
He doesn't live a life of anonymity. He's not, or like Doctor Strange, who's got 12,000 magical enchantments to protect himself. You know what I mean?
He doesn't live in a house with like moving walls.
Yeah. So Spider-Man is always in that way. Why a lot of people like him is because he's relatable, and I think they've set up interesting problems for him moving forward on what happens with that. And, if they do, for example, like the Sinister Six storyline, the story of people who want to, make Spider-Man pay for their perceived wrongs, or it's even in the mid-credit scene for Spider-Man Homecoming, it's when Vulture and Scorpion meet up, and they're talking about, there's the whole scene of Scorpion saying, I heard you know who Spider-Man is, basically I've got some friends on the outside of the prison who'd love to meet up with him. And Vulture, of course, we don't know what game he's playing, but he's kind of got this, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea who Spider-Man is. But the second that the bad guys see, like, this news report saying the 16-year-old kid is Spider-Man, they might not believe it, but, if they go and kill a 16-year-old kid and find out they were wrong, it's not really any skin off them, right?
Just in case.
Let's go kill this kid who may or may not be Spider-Man. So I feel like in that way, it kind of poses an interesting problem of, how do you survive that? Even if you had the resources of Iron Man, how do you get through that without uprooting your whole life, right? So I feel like that is an interesting point to kind of consider. And I don't even know if they know what they're doing with it yet, but they've set it up deliberately to go somewhere with it, I think.
Right, because, even if they do manage to, put a lot of spin on it and, have people vouch for him, they can't put that genie back in the bottle. They can't put that toothpaste back in the tube.
No. And it affects him and people in his life. Which also, as a sidebar, the supporting cast was very great in this movie. I particularly actually liked Zendaya's role in this one as, the MCU's MJ.
Yeah, they gave her more of a personality.
And I honestly, I didn't get all. I wasn't really on board with the characterization in the first one, just because it's addressing obviously the first topic where a bunch of crybaby boys on the internet get all upset when one of their characters is their race has changed. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other that they chose to cast an actress of color as if not Mary Jane Watson, what her
equivalent MJ,
her equivalent MJ in the MCU. I find her characterization it was kind of bland and just kind of
in the first one she was sarcastic.
I'm an anachronistic teenager kind of thing, whereas in this one actually kind of having a relationship and a rapport with the other characters I thought was really cool, and I actually really enjoyed her performance. And her and Tom Holland had this really cute high school movie chemistry to it. And I feel like because of that, their relationship now has more stakes and it's more interesting to see where it goes. Because that's the thing, one of the things about Spider-Man is he's always had one of the biggest supporting casts, right? Both between his rogues gallery of, the 100 different villains he has and all the various friends he has. He's always had an interesting cast of supporting characters. So I feel like they've only begun to scratch the surface of that. And
he does have the biggest, family, so to speak. Because, Captain America has Bucky, Peggy, and not the Vulture. Was
Falcon.
Falcon.
Yeah.
And Falcon. But Falcons are a relatively recent addition.
And it's pretty much the same for the rest of them. They have their friends, but they don't have this big,
Yeah, Thor had Jane, who is not in the picture anymore. He had his co-warriors, who also aren't in the picture anymore, except for maybe Sif.
I still can't get on board with that conversation, considering I think that was the killing of Thor's. The killing of Thor's friends made me very upset about Ragnarok, but I digress.
I know he might have like convinced them to bring him back in the snap.
Maybe.
But yeah, and he doesn't really have any. Like now he has the Guardians of the Galaxy, but like that, they're also a bunch of orphans in space.
Space orphans.
Yeah. And who else? Like Natasha, like specifically, does not have a family.
Yeah.
She notably does not know the name of her father until the Red Skull tells her.
In Endgame, yeah.
Yeah. Hawkeye has a family, but that's his twist that he's carrying around now.
Yeah.
And Doctor Strange also does not have. He has like employees, I guess, and the lady doctor who he has the hots for, I think, or did they like settled on being friends? But anyway, he doesn't have that big of a.
The supporting cast.
Yeah, he doesn't have parents. He doesn't have children.
No, whereas they kind of joke about that in Far From Home as well, about when his friend Ned there is saying like, "Oh, you're a friend of Spider-Man now, right?" It's like a thing. It's an in joke, right? Because that's the whole thing is like if you're someone who's touched by Spider-Man's life, like it affects you in some way. And one ongoing theme with the character of Spider-Man is him, kind of always referencing like the crappy luck that he has.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like that's. It's groundwork for whatever they choose to do with it. They have so many different ways they can go, and
and like with I have a thing about with his crappy luck, but you go.
I think that it's also interesting in that because they barely scratched the surface of all the different storylines and combinations of storylines and characters they could do. And it's interesting because thus far with the MCU Spider-Man, the new ones, they've chosen to specifically go with not just like the villains, which obviously, but with a lot of the supporting characters that maybe haven't been seen before in Spider-Man movies. Like they're really trying to create forge blaze their own trail basically, and forge their own path. And like it started by using villains, none of which have been used in the movies before, but then also what I'm saying, using supporting characters instead of just the same fallbacks. Yeah. So I think it's interesting, and that's only expanded more with them tying in Spider-Man, like dropping him into the middle of the MCU with all these other characters and crossing over with like the cast of Iron Man, for example. Like they're very much playing up this like support network of people that he has. Yeah. And so I think it lets them draw from pre-existing material while also going their own way and creating unique stories.
Yeah. I think Spider-Man has not only the most reoccurring characters, but also the like closest. Yeah. Like going back to Thor, there's that scientist guy who like is around, but he's not really, like best friend with Thor. Right. He didn't even show up in Endgame. Yeah. But with the going to the thing I was going to talk about, the Spider-Man having bad luck, and how basically every incarnation of Spider-Man I've seen, he's like down on his luck. He's struggling to pay rent. Mm-hmm. He money issues and stuff like that, and how. I remember reading a thing about how there's a really strong reading of Spider-Man as a character concept being a story about about poverty and how poverty affects. I can't figure out the words to put this thesis together, so let me just talk about the body of this argument of how Peter Parker is every incarnation. He's a brilliant scientist, inventor, chemist, whatever.
Type, yes.
Not so much in the Tobey Maguire one because he of his like organic webbing that he like shot out of his hands or whatever. Yeah. But in the ones where he like makes his own web fluid, his own web shooters, which to be honest, that's sort of him doubling down on his spider theme. Yeah. He has like a sixth sense and he can stick to walls. That could be any. He could be any animal, basically. But like, nope, spiders. But yeah, he can create this like material that is has a really good tensile strength and is really sticky, you know, really like sturdy, and he can invent these devices and all these like robotics and mechanics and stuff, but he's poor, so he has to spend time instead of, you know, honing his ability or like making his millions by being a inventor or whatever. He has to work at a pizza shop. Right. He has to work at a different pizza shop. Yeah. You know, he has to do his homework. He has to get money to buy school supplies and stuff. He has to scrounge, a DVD player that he found in the garbage the first time we see him. You know, he has to scrounge together rent to pay for a place for him and his aunt to live in, you know, and how like he's being very hamstrung by being poor. This isn't so much present in the MCU when he's backed by Tony Stark and his infinite Batman ducks of money.
His like his budget, his never-ending budget.
But he still, you know, like he's not rolling in it financially.
Right.
And how like there's a whole reading that you could do with Spider-Man of like imagine the inventions and technological advancements we are missing because Spider-Man needs to pay his bills.
Right.
You know, because like I remember reading how like with Shuri from Black Panther in Wakanda, you know, she's a brilliant tech person, whatever. I don't know what her faculty is. Yeah. You know, I don't know what her specialty is. And I don't know what kind of technology vibranium can be turned into. But, you know, she's been described as being as smart or smarter than Tony Stark.
Right.
Right. But she's part of a royal family of a ruling superpower that is secret and has the most useful material on the planet. So she doesn't need to worry about paying the bills. Mm-hmm. She might need to worry about a coup, which is a different kind of problem.
Black Panther too.
But, you know, she, you could argue, is who Peter Parker could be if he didn't need to worry about the bills. Mm-hmm. You know, and she is doing very well for herself.
Yeah.
You know, not just because she's the daughter of the leader of the nation.
It's true. So when you eliminate the poverty from Spider-Man, it changes the direction he goes in, right? Because some of the later stories with him too, when he's like, you know, gone into university and he's grown up and he's whatever, is like he starts his own company, like his own kind of like science company at one point. Dude, that's something I can see like MCU Tom Holland doing.
Yeah, especially with the suit assembly scene on the jet.
That, which again, it ties into me saying like that was one of my favorite scenes in the movie with, you know, him making his own suit and that kind of, you know, Happy not saying it, but the way that he looks at Peter, kind of seeing, you know, this like rebirth of Tony Stark, you know what I mean? Like this crafty, like bright-eyed, optimistic.
Yeah, even some of the same like hand gestures that Tony did.
Yeah. Which I think in that way, again, kind of caps off this section of the MCU and this chapter in movie history and storytelling of the universe itself by showing, you know, maybe he's not going to be the next Iron Man, but, you know, he can carry the legacy on in his own way. Yeah. And I think that's very much at the heart of what the movie's talking about.
That might be how, like, the identity reveal impacts him going forward.
Right.
Because, I mean, like it's implied that the next phase, such as it is going to be about space. Right. So assuming they don't just, like, ignore Earth anymore.
Yeah.
But I could see maybe like they convince people not to like, you know, they convince the world at large not to assassinate Peter Parker.
Right.
But the powers that be are like cagey enough about working with Peter Parker that they can like Happy and Pepper can't fund Peter Parker anymore.
Right.
You know, like they can't officially associate.
That is true, yeah.
I could see that being like, no, if we do, the shareholders will pull out or whatever. I don't see them being people particularly worried about shareholders, but like there's something like that, you know, some kind of like, we can't help you anymore because you have this target on you kind of thing. Or even with Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. of like, other than Fury not being present, technically speaking, I could see him being, unless they can, well, I guess they could have people like, testify against Quentin Beck being a hero.
Right.
But as we've from what we've seen so far, him being, but also like he has a like track, like a several years of having been a hero, a pillar of the community, locally speaking.
Right.
But him having allegedly murdered a heroic figure that was able to convince Peter Parker himself that he might be the next Iron Man.
Right.
And also, you know, he looks like Jake Gyllenhaal, so he's going to win over more people with that.
Of course. With the daddy beard and the slick back hair.
Yeah, sure.
It's pretty Jake Gyllenhaal.
I could see that people, like, upsetting people in universe, or like putting enough doubt on people in universe.
And I mean, that in itself, combined with the whole, you know, people only listen to people who shoot lasers and wear capes thing, it very much factors into what are people willing to believe when it's packaged in an attractive way. Because Jake Gyllenhaal, again, you know, as this, like, sympathetic, earnest superhero, you know what I mean? Like, it reads well, right? For him, it reads, people are going to want to believe that, much like the audience does for the first half of the movie, you want to, even if you've got your doubts, you want to believe that this, like, earnest, kind of sarcastic, like, attractive guy is, as his personality is as attractive and he's genuine.
Although, like, I wonder how, like, you know, taking away the dramatic music from that scene, from the identity reveal scene, you know, I wonder how the, like, average person on the street would react to that, you know, like, oh, we've just got this footage from the attack in London, you know, it's very disturbing. We've just found out the person who murdered our hero is this 16-year-old child. And like, I wonder how, like, like, what? I don't believe that, you know, like,
I'm not so sure about that.
I wonder how much it's going to stick.
Yeah.
Even with, Jameson, like, pushing for it, of like, yes, I will pillory this 16-year-old child for murder.
Put him at the stake!
This random 16-year-old child who I've never met before.
Yeah.
But he looks like a menace.
Yeah. The legacy of Spider-Man.
Are there any other pieces that we have, like the, are there any other scenes we haven't talked about? Any particular pieces of the movie we should go over? Apparently the bus driver guy. Apparently he's also a villain.
Some people had a theory about that because there's a villain who's named Dimitri in the comics.
Yeah, like Chameleon.
The chameleon who can kind of like change his face through like disguise. Some people thought that was who the bus driver was.
Yeah, or like with Scorpion, who's going to be eventually have powers or something. What the chaperone that they have always with them, the guy from the first one, what does he do? I mean, like, what does he teach? He's their, like, debate coach.
He's a science teacher.
And but it's a science school, so they're all science teachers, you know? Like, is he... Because the other teacher is apparently a teacher about witches and whatever. But, like, I was going to say, I wonder if in the third one they're going to have him leave the country again, or, like, leave the city again, but I'm pretty sure they are, because, like, they could have him be on the run. Yeah. You know? Which is more... I don't know, tonally expected than a European vacation. Right. A couple months after a devastating cataclysmic event in the wake of a apocalypse. Yes. So like I could, but it's interesting that they have. I guess that's the angle they're going with, right? With the Spider-Man movies of this neighborhood Spider-Man being taken out of the neighborhood. I think so. Yeah. Like with the first one, they go to DC, and in this one they go to Europe.
And Infinity War, he goes to space.
Infinity War goes to space. But, like, I don't know where they can go further than Europe in terms of the Earth. Unless they, like... Because if they're gonna, you know, take the neighborhood Spider-Man out of the neighborhood, it needs to be somewhere recognizable. Right. You know? Like DC with the monuments, or Europe with the monuments. But if they just throw them to some random planet in space... for, you know, longer than they did in Infinity War. Because, you know, they can have him be on a different planet in Infinity War because it's not about him. You know what I mean? Yeah. They don't need to put any time towards really the traveling or, you know, like in both of them they have time about him commuting to the new place or whatever. So, like, is he going to go to, like, Australia?
I was gonna
run away to Australia?
Is he as far as you can possibly go?
Is he going to pull, like, a Truman Show and go to Fiji? You know, like, is he going to go to China, you know, to get the Chinese audience
Maybe.
On board? Because, like, a bit, like, that's something they do, you know, like, with the... there were two movies that did regional pandering, for lack of a better word, in different ways. And one of them did it much better than the other. And I forget which movie did which and which one did it better. But one movie, I think it was Iron Man versus Pacific Rim, I'm going to say. Or might have been the Godzilla. Anyway, one movie set... I also don't remember what the other example was. But one movie did it in that I think they just had it set more in, say, China, which I think was the Pacific Rim one.
Pacific Rim, the first one.
Whereas the other one had, like, scenes specifically for the Chinese release that had cameos from celebrities
I remember hearing
in
about
China.
that, yeah.
Which I think was the Iron Man one.
Yeah.
And I forget which one did it better. I think the Iron Man one went over better. Or, like, the one with the celebrities.
Right.
The specific scenes, the added scenes with cameos from celebrities did it better. Or, like, was more better received. Which is completely tangential to the thing I'm talking about. But, like, yeah, so I wonder where... They could just have him be in the woods, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
They could film up in Stanley Park with the woods that look like everywhere.
Yes. Living in the shack that Tony Stark used to live in, the cabin.
Oh, yeah, that cabin. Well, I feel like there's people living there.
Apparently, did you hear about that? No, the cabin.
It's an Airbnb.
It's an Airbnb, the cabin that Tony Stark is living in Endgame.
I wonder if it's... I wonder if it's one of those things where they have the exterior shots in a different place than the interior shots.
Maybe, yeah.
But yeah, actually, they could have him run off to, like, take shelter with Gwyneth Paltrow and what is the daughter's name? Morgan. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess they could. But did they? I don't remember where that was. Was it anywhere near where New York is?
They can fudge it. They can compress space for an MCU movie, I think.
Yeah, and they're trainers. They could have multiple cabins in the woods.
Yeah, why not? I would.
Although, no, I was going to say it was destroyed, but that was the Avengers compound. They destroyed the Avengers compound.
Yeah.
Where are they going to have Ant-Man fight Falcon now?
Yes.
But, yeah, they also don't have a base anymore. Really.
Yeah.
I guess they have whatever S.H.I.E.L.D. is living out of now. But...
In outer space?
It's unclear if that's a S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, or if it's just the Skrull thing, or I don't know, that might be the Skrull branch of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Which, of course, factors into the question of where is that going as well.
Right.
That's kind of the big question I think right now is what's happening with...
why is Fury there?
What's happening with Nick Fury in outer space with the Skrulls? Like, it sounds like you're playing Clue. Like, it was Nick Fury in outer space with the Skrulls.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
And it looks like the Skrulls have done pretty well for themselves. You know, they look like they've gotten back under feet in their, 20-year...
Yeah.
Or, I guess it would have been 30-year in the time jump.
Point, yeah.
30, 40 years in the time jump. But I think the going theory is that he's doing... It's foreshadowing Sword.
The outer space version of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the comics.
The outer space branch of S.H.I.E.L.D. Tying in with the theorized, more galactic focus of
the next
Phase 4.
phase of Marvel movies.
I don't know. I'm not used to running out of things to say. Normally someone comes in and kicks us out.
So I think on the wrap up, I think we're there. So I don't know. For me, Spider-Man Far From Home. I keep wanting to call it Spider-Man Homecoming. They really tripped me up with this whole putting home in the name of all the titles. Spider-Man Far From Home, I'd give a crisp 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I resaw it, may re-see it again. I don't know. It was really fun. It was nice, like I said, uplifting, with also its kind of heavy moments of gravitas that factored into the the greater Marvel Universe. Tom Holland, for me, has finally started to kind of sink into Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a character that I like, but has never really resonated with me.
No.
And like Tom Holland, I'm definitely been coming around to his portrayal of it. I think this one too, I kind of like his characterization like a little bit more. I feel like I've gotten to know this character. You know, maybe in a couple of years I'll feel like him like I did about Iron Man. So Tom Holland I thought was great. And for me also like standout performance was definitely Jake Gyllenhaal, another banger of an MCU villain. Finally showed that you can kill off an MCU villain in the end, but still give the character meaning and have a good performance. So those were standouts for me. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. I've seen it twice. The first time I watched it though, I enjoyed it more the second time I watched it.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Because like after I watched it the first time, I was like, it's okay, but I like the first one more, Homecoming more. But the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Then I watched it the second time and I liked it more so then. But I think what affected my first watching of it was I was worried about how they would do the Mysterio twist, or if there was going to be one at all.
Right.
Because, that would have been the biggest twist of all, of him being like a legit hero that no one trusts, and then he dies, and they're like, oh no, he was legit the entire time.
Yeah.
But then, so I was a bit like hesitant to, I don't know, I was worried that they would do it poorly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, like I said, the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. I don't think he, for me at least, reached the same level as Michael Keaton's Vulture did.
I would agree with you, yeah.
But it was solid. I was initially, and still a little bit now, disappointed that they didn't go the actual multiverse route in this movie. Mm-hmm. They've established the multiverse in other movies and also on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But it would have, like, having the multiverse fracture as a result of the snap was a neat idea that I don't think they could reuse. Like, if, for example, if in the next Doctor Strange they're like, oh yeah, no, it totally did actually fracture, it wouldn't have the same
impact
because it was shown as
a con
in this one,
Yeah.
I did also, this is verging back into more discussion actually. I also found it weird how much the movie focused on his junk. Because
I actually really like that line when they're like, how's the new suit, Peter? And he's like, it's a little tighter on the old web shooter. That was
there was
lines, actually.
But there was that. There was the lady shouting at him to undress, and him starting with his pants, which is not what I was doing. And then there's him changing in front of MJ.
Yeah.
And then also when he's confirming Happy's identity in the tulip field.
There's the joke about
and I'm like, this is a lot of times.
There's a joke about watching adult films, which is perfect. That's one of my favorite gags in the film, actually.
And I like one or two, I'm like, okay, sure. Sure, there's like a convergence of like, it's a callback or whatever, but like four times feels like a lot.
Spider-Man 3, home base.
Yes.
Spider-Man, I'm trying to think of junk puns because he's going through puberty.
But yeah, that was I thought it was a weird, like, I don't know how to feel about that.
He looks like he's 16, but he's actually like 23.
Yes.
He's legal, Vincent. On that note.
No, but I thought it was a weird thing to keep bringing up in this movie. Just like,
sorry your surrogate dad figure died. Also put on some pants and stop watching adult films.
Yeah, I guess that's the takeaway.
Spider-Man Far From Home.
I guess that's the takeaway from this movie. From the epilogue of Endgame.
Yeah.
But I guess that's it from us this week. Did we decide on what we're going to be talking about next?
I'm down for Newsies.
Newsies?
Tune in next time for Christian Bale in a musical before he became Batman.
Are we going to watch the Christian Bale one or the stage recorded one? Or the theater in the start?
Maybe a combination of two.
Okay. Are you going to watch both then?
Maybe.
All right, I guess we have time on the whenever the next one we do is.
Always leave them wanting more.
Yeah. But yeah, this has been All Doubt. I've been Vincent.
I've been Phelan. Thank you for listening, and we promise that not all episodes are going to be Marvel superhero films.
If Newsies turns out to be about Marvel superheroes...
Do a twist and...
If Christian Bale's character in Newsies turns out to be a young Bruce Wayne...
Get those fan theories going. Come on, Reddit.
But yeah, that's it from us today. Have a good week, everybody.